Hi, John Lay here from Talented Learning. Welcome back to our executive briefing series. On this series, we're fortunate enough to take a world tour and visit with the leading providers of learning technology and learning systems in the world. And with each vendor, we explore the business side of who they are, their history, their mission, the markets they serve, their key differentiators. And then from a demonstration side, we get to see it all come to light with some real live demonstration to highlight those differentiators. And so today on our stop from Toronto, Canada, is Thinking Cap and the president of Thinking Cap, Doug Wallace. Doug, all yours.
Okay, so Thinking Cap was first launched in 2003. We started off as two products, Thinking Cap Studio and Thinking Cap Campus. Campus was an LMS and Studio an authoring tool. We really dove into this for the authoring side of things. That was our big area of XML-driven authoring environments for e-learning. And I can tell you honestly that the LMS was a second thought. It was people who had bought the authoring tool, wanted a place to put them, and we didn't want to leave money on the table, and so we began an LMS. Wow. But since 2003 to now, really the authoring tool has become a smaller part inside the LMS, and the LMS is the show. That's who we are. We are an LMS vendor and deliver very unique solutions to clients that range a whole bunch of different verticals. Our largest customers would include Amazon and the British Council, but I think our largest sector of business would probably be associations. And it happened by accident. We never really looked for it, but we were working on some certain areas in our LMS around the way we divide up silos inside a single LMS for, say, a company that has multiple divisions and that wants to have limited visibility between them, and building all of that out, building out the way we manage credits, the manage accreditation. We sort of moved into an area where we were attractive to associations, and then we added association after association after association, and our capabilities got stronger and stronger. Like in terms of we can handle multiple credit issuing organizations inside a single LMS. Each one of those organizations having multiple credit categories, different rules for how those credits are calculated, maximums, minimums, reporting then to third parties. And we started building that in and got really good at that, and it became very attractive to a lot of organizations. And so that's probably our biggest focus now, is we are focused on the association space. Even though our customers come from all over the place, that's who I think we best serve these days.
That's great. That's great. And the complex CE management is exactly that. It's a complex feature set to sort out, and a lot of LMSs struggle, stop way short of the one type of CEU for everybody with no rules. Seems to be the
yeah. It started off with first customer saying we need to be able to give out decimal points to 2 decimal points of credits. Then someone else saying, oh, we need credits to be issued from these 2 credit providers, and it all just grew and grew and grew organically.
Great.
I would say that complexity is our wheelhouse. Like we have, if you've hired us, Amazon hired us not because we're the largest LMS. We're not their only LMS. I think they work with Cornerstone as well. But some departments in Amazon just needed more than could be offered. We have very complicated rule sets you can create. So if you want to say that I want to auto enroll everybody who matches this, and this, but does not match this, and this, and I want the start dates to be this, and I need to be this, and I want to send out an email when they're getting close to completion, and if they're late, send it to their supervisor, and if they're this late, send it to the supervisor. If you've got very complicated rule sets like that, then we're good at that, and that's what really drove Amazon towards us. Also, there's probably 40 departments in Amazon that are using the one LMS, so one license across 40 departments, and they all have their own silo. And the way our domain structure works in our LMS, every domain can inherit from above, but is almost its own silo, can have its own URL, its own look and feel, its own learner journey, and be completely divorced from that. And again, it wasn't something Amazon asked us for and we built. It was something that we had built years and years ago when we were building the LMS out to support organizations that were associations that had many members for competitive fields. and they had to be able to log into the LMS and see their learners and what's going on and their piece of the overall pie, but be completely segregated from people who are working. So,
how about that extra level of complexity of single sign-on separate for those domains? Can you split it up, or does it have to be?
We have a new customer onboarding right now who are two completely separate organizations, two separate associations that share about 20 or 30% of the users and have some shared courses. And they've come together. They were originally looking separately, but sort of through the search together, but they've decided to both buy us as a single purchase. They'll both pay half. And under the domain tree, the tree at the top will be empty, and then there'll be a branch off. And each one of them will have their own integration into their association management system, which is different for each of them. Each of them will have different single sign-on. Each of them will have different payment processors, but under the same LMS. But when they choose to share items across from each other, they can. When a learner logs into one through their URL, they'll still see their transcript stuff for both things in one place. So that's unique for us. We've never done a 2-in-1 like that, but that's what our capabilities have allowed us to be able to do.
Pretty fancy.
It's just about being around. I think that's your tagline. We've seen it all. There's nothing you could dream of as a requirement that we haven't already seen. And I say that, and then suddenly someone comes a new requirement, and we're off.
That's harder in 2020 because there's so many competitors innovating in different directions that new stuff comes along every day.
I shudder when I see new LMSs come into the market, thinking it's taking us this long to write. Like, you haven't thought of the case that's so far down. We have millions and millions of lines of code dealing with situations that I can't imagine ever anyone knowing was going to be a situation when they went in to build their brand new shiny LMS.
And how do you deploy that? Is it does each customer have a unique instance that can be customized, or is it all a cloud-based system? Or
cloud-based system, but all of our customers have their own web servers behind our thing and their own database. We have a queue-based system for being able to share the load of getting jobs done. Like, so you add a job for adding 1,000 users to a course, someone else says wants to auto enroll. So all these jobs happen in a queue with any number of virtual machines that spin up on demand to deal with that queue. So we can go from having 3 servers dealing with enrollments to 100 servers dealing with enrollments within 20 minutes. So we're massively scalable in that regard. But at the same time, we've always built it so that every customer's data lives completely physically sequestered from the rest of our customers. We don't have a single instance that everyone sort of the data is just too complex, not complex, but it's too private to be able to have it rely on that we wrote good code. All of our code can fail in its attempts to sequester our customers, and it won't matter because they are physically in their own databases.
Right. And does that mean that each client would be on its own unique version, or do you keep everybody on the same version?
Same version. That's we learned those lessons from early on. Before we were a SaaS operation, we were a perpetual license installed usually in their data centers, and we did have customers across multiple versions of the product, which was very difficult to manage. So now everyone's on the same version. It does come up sometimes that a customer will say, we're closing for our big annual meeting the next 2 weeks. So we would appreciate if you wouldn't push any updates to us during that period of time. And we make those changes all the time, but then they come back, they rejoin when they come back. But yes, everyone's in the same version of the software. And we do patches weekly, which is our tiny patches with patch notes. And our releases happen probably quarterly, where big plumbing changes come in place. And those are rolled out gradually across our customer base. So there'll be a 2-week process where everyone will move from this version to the next version, one by one.
Knowing that you specialize in professional associations, what's the licensing strategy that you use? I'm not necessarily looking for cost, but how do you charge?
We charge for active users. We charge a very nominal fee for big chunks. I give you 0 to 1,000. 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000, 10,000, 10,000, 100,000, 100,000 to a million. We do it in large chunks because we don't want the bookkeeping of the minutia, and for predictability. Customers prefer to say, yeah, I have a population of 1,500 users. I'm going to buy the 5,000 license and I'll be fine. It's marginally more expensive than the 1,000 user license. And we always have to customize. Someone comes to us and says, look, our business model is kind of weird. We get all these spikes that happen once a month and then they go away. And we work with them to come up with a price model. What we don't do is we don't charge a setup fee. And we don't have add-ons. The only thing you'll ever be charged extra for is professional services. If you've come up with a new feature that you really want to have and we don't want to build it, we will do the work to build it at your expense. And other than that, we don't charge setup fees. We onboard you, the cost to build your learner view, to work out the journeys with you, to get your old content in, to import stuff from your old LMS in. That's all part of our service. And we will typically burn 80% of your license fee getting you set up in that first year, because we don't want a customer who wants to stay for a year. We want a customer for 10 years. And even though they signed a 1-year contract, customers don't leave us. So we're happy to make that investment in the first year to get them on board, to get them happy, instead of nickel and diming, because I wouldn't even be able to do a proper quote for someone on how many hours we're going to spend onboarding them, because you never know what you're going to get until you start looking at it, until you get that file of the historical data from their old LMS, until you get the fact that all of their files aren't associated to the right place and there's a lot of work to be done, or there's some small change needs to be made the way we report credits to be able to support what they're doing, until you are doing the job before you know what that job is. So it's easier for all. You don't want to create an adversarial relationship right off the bat with customers by like constantly nickel, oh, this, you didn't tell me this, you didn't tell me this, change order. I'd rather take a bath in that first year, build a solid relationship, and then I'll make it back in the next 10 years.
Wow, interesting customer-friendly viewpoint there. Not all that common, quite frankly, to do that, especially knowing that association implementations are, just like you say, they're hard to know. The ecosystem is different every time. What it needs to snap into. AMSs are all different with different levels of LMS capability in them already, and so all that needs to be sorted out each and every time.
Always some level of customization they put on top of their AMS that you need to deal with. That's the job.
How about last question, and I'll let you get into the demo here. But you talked about integration into third-party systems to report credits.
Yeah.
Just for our audience, could you just drop a few names of those systems?
They're all acronyms in my head right now. They're so mostly medical. There are third-party accreditation bodies. So we might deal with the association, but that association is reporting credits back to another group that is
ACCME.
The CME people are doing that, and so we do that for ultrasound. We do that for physiotherapists. We do that for pharmacists. So we have like one customer who is reporting to multiple. If this course might be worth 5 credits for this organization, but it's worth 10 credits for this organization, and whether you get the credits is based on what your metadata says you have accreditation for. So we're looking up in real time that you have and issuing you your credits based on, we know that you have this pharmacist number in place, and then we're going to report it to the right pharmacist reporting agency, ACME, or I can't remember.
ACCME, yeah.
And they all rule. Some of them have like, oh, we'll auto report these ones. Other ones have rules for, no, they have to be manually claimed, because even though it's worth 10 credits, you might only claim 7 credits. So there's be a manual process. Some of them you can report the credits and then you can modify them later on if there's been a change or mistake. Other ones, it's like one kick of the can, that's all you get. So we can't let our customers make those changes. And so we have to have the complexity to be able to manage all those different ones simultaneously.
Fantastic. Let's take a look at it.
Okay. It's always difficult to do demos like this because we want to show you the system, but we don't want to show you customer data at the same time.
Right.
But what I can show you a couple things very quickly is some of our customers.
I'll tell you what, maximize that window, Doug, because I can still see your background desktop. There we go.
So some of our customers have very unique learner views, and that's because not only do we allow you to have multiple URLs, we also allow you to brand each one any way you want. And that means, let me go to learner view. You have control over the look and feel right down to the pixel. We have control over CSS and JavaScript, so you can come up with any kind of learning experience you want. So a customer, like an association, like SDMS, this is their learner experience. I can go look at all the credits that are, all of the courses that I could enroll into from here in the catalog. I can see my courses, whereas something like Framework, where people are taking generally one learning path, they have designed like this. And this is not how our learning path out of the box looks. This is how they decided they wanted theirs to look and could achieve that through our system. And sometimes that's a matter of the onboarding people work with them to build that. Sometimes it's a matter of their own people go in because they've got the CSS and the JavaScript and can do it all themselves. But what is true is that you can't tell a Thinking Cap LMS from the learner experience, because we have no two customers who have anything like the same visualization of their learner experience.
Mm-hmm.
So we can go on that. But anyway, so here is a demo area we created called Great Canadian Beverage. And so here we see the top domain, and this is the domain structure showed here. So under Great Canadian North Beverage, each place you see this icon for a globe is a domain in the LMS that has its own URL associated to it. So underneath Great North Beverage, which looks like this, very simple. You also have something like under brand, right? Just Juice. Just Juice is a subdivision of this, and its URL is very different.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the learner experience for Just Juice. From the admin point of view, you're working with overall settings that live here in the hamburger menu, and they're like very deep settings going through the resources for managing surveys, question banks, roster uploads, security for roles, single sign-on, experience tools for the page structure of the learner view, the catalogs, registration rules, commerce rules. We have got such deep commerce rules in terms of different payment providers, passes, couponing systems, tokening systems, any model you might have for how you're distributing your learner payment, we manage that. Communications, we have over 45 different discrete notification types for you've been enrolled in a course, you are being reminded to finish your course, you're being reminded, we have 3 different levels of reminders, plus then after the fact reminders, payment, everything there's a customizable notification for. Studio, which is our internal tool for authoring courseware. And let me say off the bat, most of our customers are using any number of tools out there. We are dyed-in-the-wool, SCORM certified LMS. We don't care where your content came from. Accreditation. Not only do we support what we talked about before in terms of credits and credit category providers and certificates we give out of completion, we also support open badges standard. So if you want to give out badges of completion that can be transported outside the LMS into LinkedIn or to your next LMS, we embrace the open badge standard. Integration. We expose every function in the LMS as an XML web service. So you can build, we've had customers who've built their own LMS skin inside their own systems that are making real-time calls to the LMS to populate a list of available courses or whatever you want to dream up. We're integrated with a lot of cloud services out of the box. So most single sign-on, most payment providers, integration with Salesforce, integration with a lot of common tools are already baked in. And then we've got some advanced tools here for modifying the LMS through massive spreadsheet imports and exports to do a lot of day-to-day taking care of large populations.
Mm-hmm.
But where you're spending most of your time is here, and you've got the ribbon. The dashboard tells you the current logins, completions. It looks a little more impressive in a real-world setting. So you see what's been going on. You can pin individual activities to your dashboard so that if you're really focused on this course right now, you can pin it here and see the details. Beside dashboards, activities. So let's talk for a moment about what we support for activities. We support e-learning courses that can be from a SCORM package, 1.2 2004, or can be an uploaded PDF or PowerPoint or video, and we convert all of these to SCORM packages as they're brought into the system. We support instructor-led training that can be face-to-face or in a virtual setting. So we see those as both as rooms that those sessions are happening in. We're integrated out of the box with Adobe Connect, with GoToMeeting, with Zoom. We're adding Teams very shortly. There's a lot of ask for the Teams to be integrated. We support activity types called portfolio, comprehension, demonstration, all different ways to capture learning activities that are not traditional. So a demonstration is where you're doing something in the real world and a supervisor signing off that you've done that task. A portfolio is generally something that's been done in the real world and you're bringing it in, like my college credit can be a portfolio activity. And then we've got comprehension, which is very similar to an e-learning course, but we're adding the extra dimension of the ability to attest that you did the thing. So I've read and understand, because we have a lot of compliance courses that are going on that we not only need to be able to prove that you've done this thing, but that we can also be able to back that up. And that is also something that we'll talk about maybe a little later, which is everything happens in the LMS is logged and stored forever. We have a big medical audience that has to stand up to CFR Part 11. So we need to have complete auditability in the system from multiple dimensions. I can look from a learner, see the learner's logs, activity, their logs, or overall system logs. We can justify every decision the LMS has made. Why did Brian get enrolled in this and not that? We can show that through the rule structure. So where I'm spending most of my time as an administrator is here, looking at activities generally, where I can see a summary, I can manage them, I can click on settings. So under settings are the myriad of different settings. And let me tell you, one of the big jobs the onboarding group does is coming up with all of the default values for all the different settings. So if you always have your video scrubber turned on and allow users to use it, we make that a default setting for you and then don't bother with it again. Because as you can see from this page, we have a lot of settings around every activity and we wouldn't possibly expect you to understand and use all of them all the time. But they're there because we're the complexity people. That said, we can turn a lot of this off and we only show you what you see based on your level and security. So if you were to log in as a different user, half of this might not even be here. So I have my basic information, I have my enrollment rules. As I said before, we support very complicated enrollment settings that start off with general enrollment rules, self-enrollment rules, where you can allow everyone in the domain to self-enroll, or I can build multiple rule groups. I might say that these users can enroll for free. These users have to pay $10. These users have to pay this and that. I can define all that here. I can set up auto enrollment rules, recertification rules. Like that's, and this is the thing I talked about in terms of a new LMS joining. Would they ever think that when someone creates a rule for why someone should be enrolled in a course, that the rules for re-enrolling them 2 years later when that course is no longer accredited would be a different set entirely? So you might say that I want all California managers to be enrolled in this course the first time. And the second time, I only want California managers who like the color blue. If that's your rule, we can support that. Withdrawal rules, auto withdrawal rules, those are all some very important settings that come up from time to time as you're going through it. I'm not going to take the full time to go through everything here. We support multiple prerequisites, completion and weighting. If you want to say that the overall course completion only happens when you've done the package, provided the feedback survey, and done the test that you've added to the end of it, and that test needs to be 70% or more, we can support all that through completion and weighting rules. We give out badges, certificates, accreditation rules, recommendations. So upon completion of this course, what are we recommending to you next? Prerequisites, badges, credits, cohorts.
Tell me about that.
You might have multiple users enrolling in the same course, and they're different users, and you want to do different things with them. So let's say you've got I'll tell you where it first came from. We first came from a customer of ours who were doing early childhood development, and they were enrolling people into this course all the time, but they were grouping their users into birth groups. So you would be in a cohort of people who are giving birth within the same 3-month period that you were giving birth. And we had turned on a thing inside the discussion forums so that you can have cohort privacy inside discussion forums. So when I'm posting and reading discussion forums, I am limited to see and post only to the group with I'm a member of. And so that's where cohorts really came from. You can have different established completion dates for the different cohorts. So instead of setting up the same course over and over and over again as different silos in your LMS, we've got one setup with multiple cohorts inside it. So.
And you can use then perhaps like that portfolio type capability or assignment type capability that these cohorts are working together to, I don't know, submit assignments for group comment and things like that.
Well, we have assignments and assessments, and assignments can who's marking it, like who we are assigning as the moderator. You might have multiple moderators in the same course, and we're going to make them teaching assistants to different cohorts. We even have metadata rules for applying different supervisors to different people for that purpose, and that's really comes from the British Council, who are doing English language training all over the world, and they are making sure that the right groups of students are attached to the right supervisors to take them through the whole thing all the way through.
One of the challenges I seem to run into out in the market is organizations that have a cohort concept for something that takes a long time and that has a lot of pieces. So it might be 13 weeks of once a week, plus each week has pre-work and discussions and post-work and maybe a survey, and it becomes like this kind of nested long monster inside a cohort. Do you run into scenarios like that in associations?
That will become like a learning path, and that learning path has multiple objects inside it, but maintaining the continuity of enrollment so that cohort's respected the whole way through. Yeah, that's something we have to deal with all the time.
And
then
can that training path have nested activities in it? So
we can have any level of nesting inside a learning path.
And you can get at the reporting at any one of those levels?
Yeah, so we're reporting. Remember, the activities inside a learning path have a life unto themselves because they might also be in other learning paths. So we deal with the issues around this. Start with enrollment. When I enroll you in the learning path, we've got settings that say enroll you in all the parts that are inside, except for some parts might be, let's say you've got an ILT. That's first thing everyone's got to do is the welcome to the company ILT, and that happens once a month. Instead of having a learning path that you add 12 objects to, what we do is that ILT for welcome to the company becomes a member of what we call an equivalency. And so you add the equivalency to the learning path. And so when I join the company, it'll enroll me all the pieces it can, but that piece it won't enroll me into. But the first time I log in the system, it'll say, hey, you need to enroll in this, pick one of the 12 locations you want to go to. And then you do that for a customer, and the next day you are, how do we transfer between, I went into A, but I should go to this one instead, and how do we handle withdrawals? And then out of that you can establish reasons for withdrawing that are acceptable so that people will show in their transcript that they were withdrawn and the reason why and who withdrew them. So you've seen this, it just grows and grows and grows. And like you said, every part of this needs to be reportable. So all of our reports throw a cohort in to narrow the field you're looking at for that as well.
How does XAPI play into or not play into this discussion?
It doesn't. I am probably the world's I'm the biggest detractor of the point of XAPI you'll ever find. I have yet to have a customer who can tell me anything they'd like to do with XAPI. They couldn't do a score in 2004. I'm greatly disappointed in XAPI. Score 2004 needed an update. It needed a better transport mechanism so that we would send things with JSON instead of them with XML. It needed to integrate with single sign-ons. I have customers who are lifelong training specialists who have a difficulty understanding the difference between completed and passed. It's a very simple thing. So we've got the completion rules and the success rules, yet the XAPI is going to have everyone define their own verbs and their own nouns. Doug did great on this. What does great mean? I find that XAPI was created to give consultants something to talk about at conferences. I get to find a real world use for it. And I will be the first to eat crow if you can give me one. But
Fair enough.
It came at a time when big data was really popular, and the idea of streaming sort of meaningless learning data back to report and say that some learning activities happen in the real world. I'm all in favor of that. I think that I want every activity that goes on in the organization to be reported back if it has learning information that can be used to help track knowledge in an organization. But I already have that in place in SCORM 2004, so I don't know what
So those informal activities that you were speaking of earlier that you're tracking, you're using SCORM 2004 as the mechanism.
Yeah, no matter what you want to set, like there's no shortage in transport mechanisms to send information. But then there's the question of how do you authenticate that information? If you want to be able to tack on to someone watches a YouTube video that they watched it, I need to authenticate who they were to be able to actually make that data meaningful. That I've got 5,000 people who watched the video is less useful to me. I think it's the difference between hard outcomes in learning, and we don't have to get into this at all, but sometimes it's hard to get the community of learning to get their heads down and work on the hard parts of outcomes. They would rather play with social media, play with gamification, there's too much play going on in my very humble opinion, and not enough instructional design. What is it I want my learner to be able to do now they can't do, and then working it back to the best possible interactions to get them there.
And so if you guys are the vendor for complexity, which is certainly ringing true here during the conversation, tell me about reporting and analytics. What's the layer of complexity that your customers expect there?
So we have a report section, and you can create any number of reports. So you go into here, you can build a report, and all reports can be scheduled. So once I define a report, I can say I want to run as often as I want it to run. And when I click add a report, I can pick from all the reports we have here. So let's say a completion report. I can then define the objects I want to report on. I can then be able to filter them down saying I only want to learn about learners who have completed in the last month or who have a score under this. So I can define whatever I want in this. And every month we are able to do more and more. So in terms of create only a summary report or include, so create a summary report or include only completions or only complete. So we have good reporting that's there. But I'll tell you two things about reporting. One is I don't like what we call reporting, because a lot of what we call reporting is dumping data. So telling you that 24 people completed is very different than giving you 24 rows about each individual that's there. And we do both. We do a lot more data dumps than we do reports, actually, because people want to then slice and dice the data that they have themselves. We will always increase what we can do in the LMS for reporting, but in some ways that's a bit of a mistake. Most of our customers, bigger customers now, we are doing real-time data dumping into tools like AWS Aurora, AWS Redshift, any tool that allows customers to point modern business intelligence tools at the incomplete data set is going to be better than any report I can dream up, because they can, with the newer tools that are out there for like Power BI, can build relationships of data that mean more to them than the ones that I would come up with. When I think about things, I'm thinking about the relationship of my data to itself. So enrollments, to learners, to this, to that, because that's all I know. But a proper learning organization needs to tie the data that I have to their data about real world performance, sales, what's going on in their organization. And so we need to become just a member of that data lake. And so that's what we're doing, is feeding these lakes and letting them build these new reports that can juxtapose that information in ways that we haven't thought about. So I think it's more important that an LMS be good at being able to give that data to the data lake in a way that's very complete, not obfuscating. Like, we obfuscate the data that no one cares about. There's a lot of data in our database that we need to run the LMS, but you'll never care about it. But if you want to get all of the enrollments that have happened, all of the interactions, all of the outcomes, everything in one place, so you can mine that data as you see fit, that's, I think, what the real future of reporting is in the industry.
Okay, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. Keep an eye on your own domain and let them mix the data. And you would think that, like, in that data set that you're talking about, or a data lake, that's where they would be taking it, for example, with CRM data, like Salesforce data at that point, and that making the connections in something like that.
It's the hardest thing. I think training is one of the hardest things to justify in an organization, though we all understand that it's we can't do without it. There's always the adage in advertising about, if I spend all this money advertising and only this much is effective, if only I knew what it was, and that's the old thing. Training is the same. There's a lot of training thrown at the wall that maybe doesn't do anything. And it's a shame that more time isn't taken to come up with the justifications for why we're building this course. But in most organizations, there's a reason. Something caused this to happen. We've had a lot of complaints that customers are not happy about X, therefore we're going to train our staff to do this better. Whatever informs you about that problem is a data point somewhere in your organization. So that needs to be married up to the training data that you create to see how effective we are at mitigating those problems over time. And so because no LMS could ever have those relationships inside it, your LMS needs to be a team player with the overall integration. And that's what single sign-on brings us, is the ability to have multiple systems working in harmony like that, that we don't try to recreate the wheel in the LMS, that we're not holding on to data that we don't need to know about, but that we're reporting what we do know about, so a centralized lake of data can be used to make decisions that are beneficial.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, we're out of time. So one last question. If you had to name 3 things that you want listeners to remember specifically about you, what would that be?
I would say that we are not a massive organization. Even though we've got some large customers, we're on a first name basis with our customers, and they know who's supporting them, who's working with them. And that's kind of unique in our organization, to be able to bring the kind of firepower that we bring and still know your name. I think that makes us interesting to know. I would say that if you've got complex problems, you shouldn't buy an LMS until you talk to us, because maybe we've solved them already. And the third thing I would say is that we're fun to work with. We're good people who enjoy our work, and we're not. I think a lot of LMS are sales-based organizations. They build what they're going to build, and they go out and sell as many people as they possibly can. We're a little backwards. We have never really focused on sales. We get enough customers to pay the bills, and so we are more interested in the technology solutions, these training problems, than we are in selling 100 copies of our mousetrap.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. Great differentiators from Doug Wallace, President, Thinking Cap. Doug, thanks for joining me today. It was great to have you and learn about your solution.
Thanks very much.